Okay. Alright, it is June 3rd, 2015, and my name is Paul Fragway. I'm a systems engineer with Agility Communications Group. I have been working with IP Office for approximately 6 years. I've been with Agility Communication for 3 years. Today we kind of want to show you guys some of the IP Office tools that we use on a daily basis to make changes to the system, and also what we use to diagnose issues. So we'll just jump right in. Three main tools that we use to work on IP Office is going to be Manager, System Status, and Monitor. Manager is what we use to actually make changes. So if we need to make a change to an extension, rename it, program it, create a new one, any type of programming we're going to do through Manager. Alright, we also have System Status, which is a view-only tool, but it gives us a lot of information, and it gives us what is actually taking place. So maybe there are times where we have programmed something in Manager, and we think that's what's actually active on the system, and we go and look at System Status and we may see something different. So System Status is a good tool to see what is actually active, what's not active, extensions that are logged in, also any hardware that's installed on the system. If you guys ever submit a request for an upgrade, we'll often pull up System Status to kind of take a inventory of what you currently have and what changes we may need to make to get you upgraded to newer releases. And then also Monitor. Monitor is a powerful tool, and it can really be overwhelming at times. It can spit out lots of information, and part of what we want to cover today is some of the filters that you can use to whittle down that information and capture only what it is that you need to troubleshoot the issue at hand, as opposed to collecting everything and having to weed through a bunch of noise to try to get to the main issue. So I struggled a little bit when I was putting this presentation together, because I started out first with the idea that I'll just take each application one by one and kind of hit some of the high points of it. But in reality, we don't use just one application. We use all three of these in conjunction, especially if we're troubleshooting issues. We may have all three of them opened up at the same time. So about halfway through preparing that way, I scratched that and decided what I'd do is kind of put together like a little lab and create some issues, and then we would go through and troubleshoot those issues using these three tools all together as one. So let's take a look at what we've got designed here. So here's a crude drawing, I admit, but this is kind of what we're dealing with today. We're going to be working on this lab system here. Okay, we call it the lab wrap, but basically it's a lab IP Office on release 9.1, and we're going to create a couple extensions hanging off of it, and it's going to have a trunk back to our Agility system, which has a PRI connected to the PSTN, and we're going to use a DID that rides in on that PRI and pass it off over to this lab. Alright, so most of the screenshots that you see today are going to be on the lab system. So what would normally take place is we would have this PRI and an incoming call route here that points to an extension over here in this IP Office. That would work in an SCN environment, which is what most of you guys have if you have multiple IP Offices in place. But we actually have a QSIG trunk between these two devices, so the incoming call route's not going to work because this box won't know of the extensions over here and vice versa. But we'll go through that, and you'll see how it's a little different. Alright, here's kind of the lab I put together. So what we're going to do today is we're going to create two extensions. We're going to create a PAL extension at 2050, and it's going to be a 5610 IP phone, and that's a phone that I have sitting here on my desk. We're also going to create a extension called Danny at 2065. Danny's going to be on a Communicator soft phone. Communicator is the new soft phone that was just released with 9.1, so it'll look a little different. It has a newer, more up-to-date feel than the previous soft phone that was in use before. We're also going to configure both users to self-administer their extensions. I think we've shown this before, but we'll just cover that real quick today. Also, we're going to create a hunt group on extension 202. We're going to add both Paul and Danny into this hunt group as members, and we're going to set that hunt group to ring Danny first, and then we're going to ring Paul. And we're going to enable voicemail on the hunt group and configure both users to receive the message waiting indicator light. So what's going to happen, these users will be a member of the text hunt group, and if a message is left in that hunt group, we want Danny and Paul to receive the red light at the top of the phone or inside of the communicator that lets them know that there is a message in that hunt group that needs to be checked. Also, the DID we're going to be using today is this 214 number, and it's been programmed on the IP Office, the Agility IP Office, and it's being handed off to our lab. So right now, it's been programmed, but the administrator for the Agility IP Office is telling me that it's all the programming on that side's done. But when I call it, we get an interrupt from the carrier telling us that it's not a working number. So we'll need to investigate that and find out what the problem is. And we're going to assign this DID to the text hunt group, and then obviously test it. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, we're going to start Manager, and this is what Manager looks like when you first open it up. So to actually connect to an IP Office, we'll click on this icon here. I call it a joystick. I don't really know what Avaya is trying to show with this icon here. It also kind of looks like a pipe, but we'll click on it. And my IP Office comes back. It says this is what I found out here. As a side note, let me cancel that real quick. If you have multiple IP Office units out there and you want them all to show up in that initial view, if you go to File, Preferences, and then go to Discovery, you can list out all of your IP Office units in here by IP address. Just separate them by a semicolon. That one doesn't exist, but that's just an example of what you could do. And then you could just keep on building on your list here. So if that IP actually existed, I would just see each IP Office that's on my network listed inside of this window. But today we're going to be just worried about the lab system, so we'll connect to that. So once I put in the correct username and password, it pulls down a config off of that IP Office, pulls it down to my machine. And while that loads, I'm going to also pull up these other apps. So this is system status. We have the IP address of our lab in there, and we'll go ahead and log into this. And this is typically what we do. If we have a lot of work to do, we're going to go ahead and pull up all the tools. And then here's Monitor, which I already have connected. But if you needed to connect to multiple systems, you can open multiple windows of Monitor and just File, Select Unit, and put in the IP address of the IP Office that you need to monitor. The password here, the default password is just password. Alright. So I'm going to jump right into this lab and we'll get started because we have quite a bit to do. Okay, so our first thing here, we need to create two extensions. We're going to create Paul, actually Paul Lab. No conferencing for this guy. His extension will be 2050. Okay. He's just going to be a basic user. We're not signing any power users here, but if we were, this is where we'd do it. Okay, we will have voicemail. Okay. And let's see. We'll go ahead and enable hot desking. Hot desking is a feature that allows extensions to bounce from one phone to another. So if, let's say you needed to work at a conference room downstairs, you could go down to that conference room. If you're going to be there all day, you could just log in on top of that extension in that conference room and work there for the day. And when you're done, log off. That's a feature of hot desking. But okay, so since we're first creating this extension, that extension doesn't exist. So the IP Office knows it doesn't exist, and it's asking us, hey, do you want to create this extension, and what type of extension do you want it to be? Since it's just going to be an IP extension, we'll choose H323 and click OK. So by choosing that H323, it actually creates the extension in here. Had I gone here first, I could have gone to extensions first, created this 2050, and then gone and created the user. But by creating the user and the extension not existing, the system's smart enough to know, hey, it doesn't exist, do you want to create it? So obviously we do. Alright, so we have a new user here, and Paul's going to be sitting at a phone, but he's going to need some buttons. By default he gets the 3 call appearance buttons, but we need to give him the standard buttons. We'll just copy John, and we're going to copy these buttons over to Paul here. Just like that, and we'll save that. Alright, so now we need to create Danny. So we'll go ahead, and I'm just right clicking and selecting new in this blank field here. Hope I'm not doing that too fast. I just right click, new. Okay, it brings me to a new user, and this is going to be Danny. And he's sitting at extension 2065. Okay, Danny's going to be a power user because he needs to log into Communicator. Again, that's the soft phone that he'll have installed on his PC. We'll leave these selected, but for the Communicator, he would just need the Enable Communicator and Enable 1X Portal Services. Soft phone is a holdover. That's a holdover from the old application, but either way, it's fun. Oh, we need to create him a hot desk also. And again, because the extension hasn't been created, we're going to assign it an H323 extension as well. Alright, so we have our 2 extensions. We have 2065 and 2050. Let's save those changes. Alright, now that we've created those, let's see what extensions we have registered to the system. So from system status, a lot of issues are resolved just by making sure the extension is registered. So many times we'll get a call and people wonder why they're not getting hunt group calls. Well, we go and look and they're not logged into their extensions. Or another symptom would be they say they can call internally, from extension to extension, but when they try to call out, they get barred. Well, a phone that's not logged into its extension will show this no user, and by default no user is barred to make outbound calls. And the no user is this here. So basically it literally is a user account that's created and does not have an extension assigned to it. And if you look on the telephony tab, you'll see by default the outgoing call is barred. So that's another symptom that we know that it's possible the extension's not logged in, and we can discern that pretty quickly. Inside of system status, we'll go and we'll look up the extension. So let's say if the user told us they were sitting at extension 2022, that's a digital, that's an analog phone, but maybe it was 2016, and we would know they need to log into that extension. Okay, but in this case we're looking for our 2 extensions, which are 2050 and 2065, and I don't see either of those extensions listed out here. So I'm going to log in to the phone of 5610 that I have at my desk. This will be logging in as Paul Lab. And there it is. It showed up. So with an IP set, you get a lot of information. You get the home extension. This is the extension that is programmed into the phone itself. So that on an IP phone, I can pick that phone up, and if I'm moving offices, I just take my phone with me. Digital phones don't work that way. Digital phones are assigned to the ports, the physical ports on the IP office. But this is the this is the extension that's programmed into that phone, and it syncs up with the extension that is actually logged into it, which is good. Okay, this is the user, and this is the IP address, which is useful information. If I have a system with a lot of IP phones, I can kind of discern the topology a little bit of which phones are working fine, which phones aren't, and I'll look at the IP address. Are all the phones that are having issues, are they all on the same segment? Are they on different segments? This is one location where you can get that information. Again, and you can also get the MAC address. I know it's a 5610, and it is a VPN phone. Also tells me how many voicemails, which I have none at this time. So that extension logged in and registered, so that's good. Now we want to log into the soft phone as Danny. And I've created a situation where this phone isn't going to log in right off. But this is monitor, and you can see monitor spits out. This is a quiet system. There's, like you can see, there's hardly any extensions registered. And all of these extensions nobody's sitting at. So this system's sitting here and it's quiet. If you're looking at your system, you may see this scrolling 100 miles an hour depending on how busy it is and if you have the default filters. I mean, just to give you an example of how much information is outputted, I'll just pick up the handset on this, and you'll see just one phone just picking up the handset how much information is actually kicked out. But so that's good. It also can be a problem because we have to weed through that information to actually troubleshoot a problem, right? So if you have a system with 100-something users on it, there's way too much information. So filters are what we need to learn inside of Monitor to use it effectively. So in this case, we're going to log in to Avaya Communicator, and like I said before, this is the new soft phone. We're going to log in as Danny, and it's not going to log in. So we get an incorrect extension or password. All right, and we get some feedback here. But let's go ahead and on a quiet system like this, we could just troubleshoot it like that. But I want to show you filters because I see who is logged in, and I know your systems aren't this quiet. So filters, trace options. So the communicator soft phone uses SIP protocol to actually as the signaling and the registering of the extension to the IP office. So I want to monitor SIP traffic. I'm going to clear all filters. So to get here, I just went to filters and what did I select? Filters, trace options. Okay, and I want to monitor SIP. So we go to the SIP tab, and basically I'm just going to monitor all send and receives of SIP. Okay, let's get communicator back up here and try again. Alright, and we have some output here, which is going to provide us with good information. Now, I know we're using communicator here, but this is very useful, especially if you're trying to deploy, let's say, a SIP phone, maybe a SIP conference phone. This information here can really cut that deployment time drastically. So right off the bat, I see I'm receiving a packet. Okay, I'm receiving a packet from this address, this 30.46, which happens to be the client-side IP address of the VPN tunnel from my PC back to Agility. Alright, and it's a register. And it's trying to register to this IP address, which is the IP address of the IP office, and it's coming in on port 5060, which is SIP. So it's registering. It's trying to register using acg.com. It sends 2 packets. Let's see. Actually, we received 2 packets on the IP office. All right, and then we transmitted back from the IP office back to the client a 403 forbidden to both packets. All right, so we need to discern what is the 403 forbidden. Using SIP, there's a lot of these codes that you can look up, and for the most part, they're easy to translate what the issue might be. So I just did a Google search on SIP error, and Wiki had a pretty good document that listed most common errors, and I'll look at 404 here. Was it 404? 403 forbidden. 403. The server understood the request but is refusing to fulfill it. Alright, so I know that I have good connectivity from my client to my IP office because I'm receiving the packet. I don't have to troubleshoot at that level. So now I'm troubleshooting programming. The system, from this error, I kind of discern that the system is rejecting the registration, not the user. Because when this SIP phone has to register, it has to register under the user account, which would be, in this case, Danny Lab. But I'm actually getting a higher level of denial. It's coming from the system itself. And having experience, I know that the only other thing it could be is this domain. This domain has to match the domain that you have programmed on the IP office. So let's go back to the IP office, see what we have here. So my SIP client is trying to register across the LAN port 70.12. You'll see that address everywhere. For example, on the registration request, right there. That is the IP address of the LAN port on the back of the IP office. 70.12. Right here we have a field where we can enter the domain name. And in this case we have acglabrat.com. That's what needs to be in this field here. Okay. Alright, so it should connect now. Or will it? Let's see. We're still getting a connection refused. So let's see what we have now. 403 forbidden. Let's clear this and try it again. Yep, 403 forbidden. And then there's an unauthorized. Alright, so let's look up unauthorized. And I know what that's going to be, but we'll go through the motions here. This has to do with user authentication. Alright, so let's take a double glance at our user authentication. So we have Danny Lab, which is case sensitive. So that needs to match what our programming is here. Danny Lab, that looks good. And the password is actually the password that we have programmed on the supervisor settings for the hot desk. And I know I set it to just 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's clear our trace and see if it connects now. Alright, looks a little different. This is what a successful login attempt will look like. Obviously a lot more packets traversing the network once it registers. Okay, we see a packet coming from the client to the IP office. We got the typical 200 OK, which is a good thing. So now that phone is registered. So to take that scenario just a step further, let's say we were trying to deploy a SIP phone that is maybe in a conference room downstairs, and you know what IP address you've configured on that phone, but let's say you pull up these filters and you're not ever receiving these packets from the IP address of the phone. My next step would be, in troubleshooting that, would to come here to IP networking, and actually there's a ping utility, and I can ping out that LAN 1 interface where I want that SIP phone to register, and I can put in the IP address of that SIP phone at the far end and ping it. So it sends those pings out, and we'll see what we get back. So in this case, we sent out, if that 110.10 address was the IP address of your SIP device, and you sent 3 packets and you lost all 3, you know you have a connectivity problem. Maybe you have a bad gateway on the SIP phone at the far end. Maybe the address doesn't match the network you're plugging into. Bad subnet mask. All of these things you can take a look at. Maybe you need to add a route to the IP office, or on the IP office to that segment. But it kind of gives you an idea of where you need to focus. And that's a pretty useful tool, especially when deploying SIP devices. Alright, so let's get back to our lab. So we have both extensions now we should see registered here. Yep. We see the 2050 IP set, and then we see the 2065, and it's via communicator, soft phone. Alright, so that's good. So the next step is to configure both users to be able to self-administer their extensions. That's easy. Go to Danny, Web Self-Administer. We enable it, and we'll just check these boxes here. We want him to be able to view and make changes to all of these options. Okay, forwarding, mobility, his name even. He can add and remove buttons, and we'll do the same thing for Paul. Again, this is in Manager. Again, we're making changes, so we have to go to Manager to make the change. Okay? And so Web Self-Administration is a URL. It's just a portal, and I'll show you later on. These users can be able to go to that site, log in, and make these changes. So they're not having to reach out to their admins or someone at the office and taking away from other people's time. They're empowered to make these changes themselves. Alright, so we've created that. We also now need to create the hunt group. Hunt group is going to be called Tex. Okay, we want it to ring Danny first, then we want it to ring Paul. So it's going to be sequential, which it already is. That's good. And we need to add Danny and Paul. So this is the order. It'll ring Danny first. If Danny doesn't answer, it's gonna go on to Paul at extension 2050. If we wanted to reverse this order, we can highlight, a name, move it up or down. But in this case, we want it to be Danny then Paul. We'll save that. And merge it. Alright. Alright, we need to make sure we can take off queuing, but we need voicemail. Alright, voicemail's on. We'll give it a password. If I wanted voicemail to email, I'd put that in there, but in this case we're not going to have that. Alright, so we have voicemail now. And we need to configure both Danny and Paul to receive the message waiting indicator light if a voicemail is left in this 202 mailbox. So by default, if a call comes in and voicemail is left at mailbox 202 for text, Paul and Danny are not going to get a message waiting indicator light, and they will not know that voicemails are out there. This is how that scenario happens, where later on you guys find out that you have a hunt group with a lot of voicemails in it. Maybe one person was initially set to check it, and that person's left. You've removed them out of the hunt group, and they had the programming to receive the message waiting indicator, and then later on you've replaced them, but those new users were never set to receive that indicator, so those messages all build up in the interim in that mailbox. So the programming for Danny and Paul to receive the message waiting light, we have to go to each extension. Okay, we'll start with Paul here, and we go to source numbers, and we're going to add. And the programming is H for hunt group, and it goes off the name, and it's case sensitive, has to be exactly the same as the name of the hunt group, and so H text. We need to do the same thing for Danny. We want both of them to see hunt group voicemails. Okay. I also need to I need to activate that voicemail box for this hunt group. So because it's a hunt group, it can be difficult. It's not intuitive per se right off the bat to create that voicemail greeting or to create that name. But star 17 always gets you into voicemail. So from this phone that's right here at my desk, and I can, since we're going to do it this way, I can also view. Inside of system status, I can view everything that's dialed from a particular extension. So right here, I'm monitoring extension 2050. That's the one that's sitting at my desk, and these are the 3 call appearances. So what I'm going to do from this phone is I'm going to activate the voicemail box for that hunt group.
Welcome to Avaya IP Office.
I can get more details on the call if I double-click that.
Star H. Please enter extension.
Notice I can see each digit pressed.
As you use Avaya IP Office, your name will be included in system announcements that you and other people will hear. Press 1, and at the tone, please speak your name. After speaking your name, press 1 again.
Voicemail for the text hunt group.
Voicemail for the text hunt group. To re-record your name, press 1. To approve, press pound. Voicemail for the text hunt group. No new messages. To record messages, press...
Alright, so that voicemail is active. What's next on our lab here? We have to... So next we want to map that DID from the Agility IP Office over to our lab, and we're going to point it to this text hunt group. So the administrator of the Agility system has told me that his programming's done. Alright, so I'm going to call that number and let's see what happens. I'm going to pull up monitor. Again, we need to set the proper tracing for this. Filters, trace options. We can clear all the SIP tracing. Oops. And we need to set tracing for the call. And at the end of this, I have a PDF document from Avaya that breaks down, if you're trying to troubleshoot this, these are the trace options that you need to set. If you're trying to troubleshoot, for example, a PRI, I have a PDF document that will say you need to check these boxes. And that we'll send that out after this. And you can scroll through there. It kind of lays out exactly which filters you need depending on which scenario you're trying to troubleshoot. But in this case here, we're just going to use those options. This button here that I'm clicking, what it does is it just resets the connection back to the IP office. Alright, so I'm going to call the DID. that I was assigned. Apparently it's all set up, good to go.
The number you dialed is not a working number. Please.
Alright, so I got an interrupt from the carrier that the number is not a working number. So my first reaction might be that it's a carrier issue, maybe the number's bad, because I received the interrupt, right? Well, you can troubleshoot that real fast. If I come in here and I call that number and I don't see any activity, I don't see, this is the number I'm calling from. So I can literally, if there's a lot of information on the screen, I can do an edit find, and I can do a quick search after I've made my test call for, and I just usually search for the last 4 digits. Bam, it will take me right to the instant where that call hit the IP office. If I search that number and nothing hits, and I know my filters are correct, then that call's never making it to my lab. So it's either going to be an issue over with the Agility IP office, or it's going to be an issue farther up the line with the carrier. So the Agility admin, telecom admin, he may do the same thing. He'll pull up his monitor, okay, make a test call, and if he gets the same message and he sees also no instance of that call hitting his system, it's time to make a phone call to the carrier. In this case, the phone call is hitting my system, so it's my responsibility at this point, and I see that it's not in dial plan. So a typical setup, and what most of you guys would have set up, may differ a little bit from where we're going to venture at the moment, but I want to revisit this here. You guys typically have an SCN where this connection is an SCN between here. What an SCN does is both IP offices will learn the extensions of each other automatically. Okay, on a QSIG extension, that doesn't happen. This is pretty much an autonomous system that has a link over to the Agility system. But in an SCN scenario, to do what we're trying to do today, you would just create an incoming call route over here. Alright, and you would point it to extension with the destination of 202, which 202 would be that hunt group on the Agility Lab Rat. So ours is going to be a little different. Today, incoming call routes aren't going to work with a QSIG line the way we have it set up. What I have to do to make that work is I have to create a shortcode with that number in it and point it to that hunt group. Okay. Now I have to tell it what action to take when that call comes in. There's a lot of different options here, but I know from experience in this case we just want to do a dial extension. Dial extension right there. And we're going to tell it extension 202. Okay? We'll save that. So to go back to this, I knew that the number was making it to my system, but it had no place to go. It was hitting, and there was no extension to pick it up. There was nothing was taking that call and doing anything with it. The handoff wasn't complete. But I fixed the programming now, so let's do another call. Alright. So you can't see, but on my other screen I have the option to answer that call. Oh. So the soft phone here has answered the call. Okay, so Danny's received this call and he answered it on first ring. So that worked. That's good. Let's go back to monitor and see what we've got. Alright, so we see a lot of different feedback from monitor now. We see the call did come in. Okay, that's the number that was dialed. So the called party is the is the party that was dialed. The calling party is the one doing the dialing. Alright, found the target. SC shortcode type was dial extension. Remember, that's what we saw over here. Dial extension. Okay. Number 202, that's our hunt group. Kind of goes on. By no means do I profess to know every line in here, but it's something that the more you use, you kind of learn to figure it out. So 202 is the extension that it's going to, which happens to be our hunt group. Okay, and it goes and it rings. It rings those extensions, and you can see Danny Lab. It's at Danny Lab. That was the extension that it was targeting, and Danny answered. All right. So now that worked. What are we doing on time? Alright. Guys, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And then what I want to do now is I want to show you. So that works. So that rings Danny, and had I let it go long enough, it would ring the other extension. Okay? Which is 2050. But I'm going to log Danny out. I'm going to call that extension. I'm going to call that number again. This time it should ring to the desk. Yep, because Danny is not registered in the system. Now it's going directly to extension. It's still going to 202, but the only active member in that hunt group is extension 2065. And I can see that here. See, I'm sorry, 2065. Not using 2065, so it skips to the next user, which is 2050. And I'm going to let it go to voicemail. If I'm looking at this extension, I can see that it's alerting and not picking up.
By Avaya IP Office.
Voicemail for the tagged hunt group.
Is not available. To leave a message, wait for the tone. When finished recording, press pound for more options. Record at the tone.
Hello, this is a message for Danny and Paul. Please give me a call back. Thank you. Alright. So I left a voicemail. And because of the programming that we enabled on these users, and just to review it real quick, right, this H-text for Danny and Paul, I have a message waiting indicator light on the extension at my desk, and I can prove that. I can go to the extension. If I go inside of system status, extension, and I find 2050, I see a lot of information here. Firmware, that's a good one to know, especially after an upgrade. If a phone's having issues, you want to make sure that it received its firmware after the upgrade. But in this case, we're looking for message waiting on. So I can compare that here. So I know that message waiting indicator light is not coming from Paul's personal voicemail box, because you see here that messages are at 0. But if I go back here, the light is on, and that's because he is a member of that text hunt group, and he has the proper programming in place to alert him to check that voicemail box. So Paul would go and look. He checks his mailbox maybe first, sees there's nothing in it. So then he knows. Of course, now we all have the visual voicemail with the newer phones, the 9600 series phones, and you can do all this by just looking at the phone. You don't have to actually dial into it. And so he sees he has nothing in his mailbox, and he quickly flips over to the text hunt group. He sees that there's a message waiting in there. He checks it and calls his customer back. All right, that's that piece. Let's see. That pretty much wraps up. Let me show you a couple of things also. That wraps up our lab, but there are a couple more points I want to bring to your attention. So, Manager by default, Manager by default is going to have these options selected. On the security tab, it's going to have the backup files on send. So that's a very important setting, and by default it's there. But what that does is when you pull a config and make a change and send it, it's going to create a copy of the configuration prior to your changes, and it's going to keep that as a backup on the computer in which Manager is installed on. So let's say I've performed all these changes, everything's fine. Okay, the text hunt group is working like it should. But now, a day later, I have a user come to me and they say all of these issues that they're having. But I know nothing's changed on the system since I was in there last programming it. And I know I made a bunch of changes and the issue is starting to affect business. So if I absolutely had to and the issue was severe enough, I could locate the backup. Okay, if I go to File, Preferences, and I go to Directories, alright, I can find where these backup files are located. And I'll pull that up real quick. Alright, this is just the Manager directory under Program Files, Avaya IP Office Manager. And in here you'll see I have a backup file for literally every change I submitted to the IP Office, the lab. And other systems I've connected to, although I've pulled those out. And they date back. So I can go back to the date and time. Let's say I want to revert back to yesterday. I know yesterday morning at 8 it was working fine. Okay, I can pull this. I can take this config, open it. So this is pretty much a snapshot of all of the changes, all of the IP Office prior to the changes that I've made, which can be pretty valuable if you need to revert back to something. Alright, so here we are. I was doing some tests yesterday, that's why these are still here. But you can see, yeah, the text hunt group isn't there yet. So, but let's say this is the config that I want to push to the system, because we've made so many changes, we can't keep track of what's breaking the situation, and we don't have time to track it down. We just need to get back to where we were yesterday morning at 8 o'clock. So we can go up to File, Offline, Send Config. And it's going to go out and find our lab. We check it, click OK, put in the username and password. When I hit OK, it's going to take that file and it's going to merge it to the IP Office. It's going to erase the config that's currently on there. It's going to revert it back to the config as of yesterday morning at 8 a.m. And there will be a reboot. So heads up on that. But when it comes back up, you'll be exactly where you were 24 hours ago. So you know that if that resolves the issue and you were the only one making changes, then it was something that you've changed between those configs that caused the problem. Okay, and so then you can pull both of these configs up, put them side by side, and do a stare and compare, and try to find out what changes you made may have created issues. Also, you can take these backup files, these backup configs, and copy them in an email and shoot them to us. If you're having issues and you want us to overlook, maybe you have an ARS table that you created you want us to inspect, or some other type of configuration, whether it's with your PRI or maybe it's a user, send it to us. Our support team can dig through it, fire back an email to you, let you know, hey, maybe make a change here, try this, whatever. Alright, that's Manager. Done with Manager, unless anybody had any questions there. And I wanted to show you a PDF document that we can send out. This document is from Avaya, and it lists monitor settings and filters. Okay, So it starts at page 17 and it goes through different scenarios. So in a case, let's say your system's rebooting, these are the filters that you want to enable inside of Monitor to try to track down and capture why your system might be rebooting. Okay. Same thing here. This is going to be your PRI. These are options that you need to set in Monitor to receive that information. And it has a bunch of different filters that are useful. Again, these are inside of Monitor. Oops. Filters, trace options. And these options that you see there correspond to these tabs and these checkboxes. And we can send that out after this presentation. We'll get a list of everybody that joined, and we'll shoot out an email with that attachment. Alright guys, well, we covered a lot of ground. I'm not seeing any questions out there today, so hopefully you guys are still awake, or hopefully we're still connected. But I hope everybody got some information, useful information out of this, and we'll continue to have these Guru sessions. Now we're going to start posting these on YouTube as opposed to posting them on under a username and password, so it may be a little easier for you guys to access. And this is our YouTube channel. Let's go back to this slide. This is our YouTube channel here. You can also search us with Agility Communications Group. That should pull us up. But I think we have one. Our last Guru session is already posted out there. This one will be posted as well. Now let's get to some of our announcements. Our support. You can reach these guys at support@AgilityCG.com. And they'll take the email, they'll get back with you as soon as possible, get you taken care of. Also, after this presentation, you'll receive a survey. Just fill it out. Let us know how we did. If there's topics that you would like us to cover in the future, just add that in that survey, and we'll get them on the list. Also, for our support customers, we have free upgrade licenses. So reach out to if you saw some features today. By the way, all these screenshots you saw are on release 9.1. If you're interested, reach out to your sales rep, and we'll break down your system, find out what it needs to upgrade. In a lot of cases, it may just need the license, and it may just be maybe an hour of time at the end of the business day to upgrade it. So that could have some value there. Also, we have events coming up. Not all of our events are Guru sessions. We do have other events where we like to meet face-to-face with our customers, and we have one coming up, I think, this month. But you can get all that information out at AgilityCG.com/events. And one last thing, our support contracts. We have two flavors. We have an advisor support, which is break fix, and we also have extended team. Our extended team covers any programming changes you need to make on the fly. Also, of course, break fix. Basically, we're an extension of your team, and if you need to redo an auto attendant, then we're there to help you and guide you through that process. But that's all I have today, guys. So until next month, you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you then. Bye-bye.